So, hello everyone. My name is Aristides Fernandez. Okay, I'm a partner solutions architect at AWS. I'm based in Madrid. I cover many partners across Europe, but focus mainly in Iberia region and France, but also supporting other partners around Europe when I can. Very excited to be here. Thank you very much. Hopefully you haven't touched this topic in the past weeks or days. So hopefully for you it's important. I don't know how many of you have been able to interact with Bedrock already or build application using Amazon Bedrock. Two, okay, that's good because I think the rest of you will learn a little bit something. But for the rest, I will try to go through, high level what is Bedrock, and some specific capabilities around the security of Bedrock. And then we will talk a little bit about how the connection goes under the hood between the Bedrock accounts and the customer accounts. So how you connect all the dots to inference the model actually, and how you can customize the model, and how actually you can apply your roles and your access management and all that in the architecture. And then, well, I will share some information there, and also can share the presentation after that if you need. And I took this topic, even though we will dive deep a little bit in terms of architecture amongst few features. It's not like I'm bringing here a real use case or something, but I think this is very important because what I see with partners and customer right away is that what is stopping from moving from POC to production are two main things. And the first thing is the data strategy around the companies that we build a proof of concept in generative AI, and the security of the data, and the security fear when they build an application through our services, right? And many companies don't have neither of those. I think it's very important to understand. So Amazon Bedrock, really fast, is our fully managed service that allows you to easily scale and use foundational models right away. Okay, it's the way where we can offer you the best-in-class models. Okay, but in an easy way, and you can use, it's a platform basically, Amazon Bedrock, where you can use your foundational models, but you can actually deploy different patterns in the generative AI application, for example, RAG with knowledge base and all that. And the key point here is that the orchestration layer using LangChain or Llama Index is not needed. So it's more intent to machine learnings or developers team than for a specific data scientists, engineers that know very well the infrastructure and how to build all these you were talking about infrastructure and how to place EC2 instance and all these kind of things. So we try to abstract that, and this is a models where you can, it's not serverless per se, but it's a managed service where you can abstract all the infrastructure that you need there. Okay, so some of the models that we offer right now in Amazon Bedrock, from closed source models like Anthropic is the best ones that we have. Actually, yesterday we announced Cloud 3.5 Haiku, okay, that is already available in our regions. But it will also support Meta. All the Meta models are there. Mistral, open source one, and Amazon Titan or models, Stability AI for image generation and all these kind of things. So a lot of models. If you want even more models, we have Amazon SageMaker. I don't know if you are already using this, but these are our ecosystem or tools to build models for artificial intelligence. Okay, and here we have more than 100 models, and we have integration with Hugging Face. I don't know if you know Hugging Face, but it's the hub for open source. I will say the first or the main hub where you can find the best models, open source models available. So we have integration directly with SageMaker if you want to move outside this. But for example, Anthropic model, you won't find it anywhere, just in Amazon Bedrock. So how we manage security? So we extrapolate security as AWS does everywhere, okay? So for us, you are AWS users, you know, for us, security is job zero, and actually it is within the company. And we have applied the same methods and the same mechanism to Amazon Bedrock, okay? That means that the access management that you have in your console and your infrastructure applies the same. That means user roles and all that. The monitoring and logging options that you have with CloudWatch and CloudTrail is still there. You have private connections between your VPC and the Amazon Bedrock service account so that you can maintain your data in private, so never goes out to the public. And you can keep, of course, as the shared responsibility model in AWS, the data is always your responsibility. So that means that you can encrypt your data at rest and it's always encrypted at transit. So as I mentioned, we use TLS 1.2 as a minimum for the interconnection, and we will see the architecture around that so you can understand what I'm saying. But we use TLS 1.1 as minimum for any interconnection between your application and our Amazon Bedrock service. And we, of course, extend our compliance and standard capabilities to Amazon Bedrock. That means that HIPAA, GDPR, and all these kind of standards are still valid for Amazon Bedrock. Some CloudWatch integration where you can monitor and customize data. Actually, we didn't have this, I think, last year, and we now are able to monitor how the performance of the inference that you are doing in Amazon Bedrock. You can monitor that through CloudWatch. You can also control and integrate audit trails in CloudTrail, so you can monitor how is the usage of your Amazon Bedrock services. And we comply with many services like ISO, CSC, and many others. Especially very important one, what we have seen with high regulated companies, especially in financial services, in healthcare services, and in public sector. What we have seen is that actually the financial service that is heavily regulated in Europe is taking a generative AI adoption very hard. I've been working with three banks in Spain, but also in France, that are adopting this, and Bedrock has been able them to enable this into production environments and not only in demo or proof of concept points. So you were talking a little bit about this, so I assume you know all this, but what I want to reinforce here is that the same type of policies that you do, inline policies, trust policy, resource-based policies, all these still apply to Amazon Bedrock. In this example here, we see an allow and deny effect on the specific model ID. Okay, so these are allowing all the models through the two APIs call that we have. In Amazon Bedrock, we have 4 APIs that you can call. The first one is the invoke model API. This is the model where you just invoke the model, you put the parameters, temperature, top K, and all that, and you are just inferencing the model. Then you have invoke model with response stream. And then we release 2 months ago, more than 2 months ago, a few months ago actually, the Converse API. And basically the Converse API is the wrapper on top where we abstract a little bit about all the specific variables that you have to put based on the model that you are using, okay? So if you're using Anthropic, you have a specific set of temperature, top K that you can use. With Converse API, we're abstracting all that. You just use the model ID and you can just use that right away. So all those APIs, even though the example shows 2, apply here for the policies permission that you can apply. And the same principle, a deny policy overrides an allow policy. Okay, so it's still, if you have your organization, you control tower, all that applies still with Amazon Bedrock and whatever application you are deploying using Amazon Bedrock. The one thing that is very important is that allowing or giving permissions to a user or a role or a service to inference Amazon Bedrock actually doesn't allow to access the model that you want to use. Okay, because here you have the roles, but then you have to give access to your account and to your region the models that you want to deploy or you want to use. And the reason we do this is, the first thing is we want to make compliance about the terms and conditions in each model. So you have to specifically enable all these models, and after you enable this model, you have to accept the terms and conditions, okay? And this allows you to fine-grain what models are accessible to your account in a region-by-region basis, okay? So if you have X models applied to Frankfurt, that doesn't mean that in Paris you are able to actually use that model, okay? So our combination, of course, of policies and permissions in AM is one thing, but then you have to enable the models in the Amazon Bedrock service per se. So the model environments, for those of you that haven't used Amazon Bedrock, we have 2 model environments right now. The on-demand one is the more, I will say, serverless, but I don't want to call it serverless because actually it's monitored a lot because the demand capacity is not unlimited based on GPUs and the capacity that we need to run these models. But you have on-demand capacity and you have the provision capacity compute. The difference between those is that in the on-demand, of course, you share the model. So basically, you are inferencing the model in a shared environment, compute environment, and that means that you can be thorough about the request. Okay, so you don't have unlimited TPS capacity or transit packet per second. You can be thorough there. And of course, it holds a baseline of the foundational model, and you are not able to fine-tune or customize the model. In on-demand, we use the Cloud 3.5 Haiku as Anthropic give it to us, and that's it. Okay, you are not able to do anything around that, just inferencing the model. Of course, with provisioning throughput capacity, that's where you can, deploy a hard copy of the model in a compute provisioning capacity that we give it only to you and only you have access. And when we say only to you, it means to all the resources that you can give access to, right? You control the permissions and the roles and the users that can access this and the account. But you commit to AWS for 1 month, 6 months, and some of the LLMs model allows you to commit for hours even, okay? But not all. And we reserve that capacity for you. And we hold a private copy of the model for you. And in this mode is where you actually can fine-tune and customize the model, okay? So here, if you have unlabeled or labeled data that you want to fine-tune your model or continuous pre-training, this is the way you have to go, okay? The key things here is that, the input and output text is not used to train the model. That's common here. The third-party providers like Anthropic, Meta, and all that don't have access to your model, and we will see this in the architecture patterns because we deploy all this in an Amazon Bedrock service account that is managed by the service team. So the same as Lambda function, the same as any serverless server that service that we have it's the same for Amazon Bedrock. The service team within Amazon manage that and don't have access to the outside world. So one thing that it's not related to security per se, but I think it's very important. I don't know how many of you knew this, but we announced, I think a month ago, cross-region inference. And I think this is a very important feature that we are allowing companies to use. This can be used only in on-demand, okay? In provisioning throughput, don't be allowed. And the thing here, and the interesting thing is that when you use Amazon Bedrock, you have to invoke the model ID, okay? And the model ID, depending if you want to use Anthropic or if you want to use Meta Llama 3.2, you have to specify which model you use. Here we changed that concept of model ID, and we are putting inference profiles. Now, the inference profiles is per model. And what the inference profile have is that we have a set of regions where we fail over automatically if the source region cannot be reached. Okay, so you have inference profile for Anthropic Haiku 3.5 model in Europe, and you have another one in the US. And the reason we have this separation is so you are compliant with GDPR and all these standards, because you cannot go to the US to make an inference if you are running an application here and you are following a specific standards or compliance. Okay, so the way this works is the client initiates the request, and this is not load balancing, okay, that we are doing here. We actually routing all the traffic to the main source region that you have. Let's say it's Frankfurt. If the capacity of that region, for some reason, in the third request, it got throttled because it's in on demand, we automatically reroute the traffic to the second region based on the inference profile that we have, okay? And normally in the second region, what we say is that you can have up to this double of capacity of the source region. Another thing that I think is very important, and of course, we respond back to the customer or the application transparently. They don't see anything. And actually, I have a demo. If we have time, I can run. It's a Jupyter notebook where you can see that the latency actually sometimes is even better in the second region, or the latency can be seconds or milliseconds also, depending, of course, what model you are using. If you are using Opus, which is the biggest model on Anthropic, it can take more time. But the key here thing is that all this is free of charge. So basically, using inference profile instead of model ID, it won't give you any extra cost around that. We are just charging you for the tokens that you use. And actually, we're using the source region price to charge you for any region that you reach, okay? So if you are using as a source region Frankfurt, and in Paris is a little bit more expensive, we will charge you with a Frankfurt region price, yeah?
Does this apply on the service quota that are region-based? So if I have a service quota to region 1, and I see that one, will it automatically reroute to the region 2?
Yeah, it will be.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. The thing is that depending what service quota you are reaching, you have to check if your application makes sense to have in this region, right? Like, that's another issue, but it will reroute. Any traffic that is requested and fail, it will be automatically rerouted if you use the inference profile and not the model ID, of course. So this is cross-region. You can use it right away. You have it in your console or API. Of course, you have to do it through the API call, and it's available right now if you go to your application. Just to give you a little bit of context around the inference strategy that we now have. In one time we have batch inference, okay? Of course, depending on the use cases, sometimes we know that batch inference are the best way if you have to run a model one time and that's it. And this can be up to 50% less pricey than the on-demand and provisioning throughput inference. Then we have the on-demand and provisioning throughput, and then the cross-region inference that we have announced yet. I won't touch about pros and cons. You have it here, and I can share the slide. But each one of these has a purpose. What we always recommend is that using on-demand is for test, developer, or non-critical production environments, because you can be throttled here. Of course, now with cross-region, you can experiment a little bit more because you will have the fail over between regions. But if you have a productive critical workload, we always recommend provision throughput, okay, where we can guarantee the latency that you need. So with that, what happened with on-demand and provisioning throughput around how is the connection? The first, we have the client connectivity. As I mentioned, I will talk about Amazon Bedrock Service Account later. But basically, the yellow arrows just show you if you have a public IP, okay, and you want to interconnect to the inference endpoint of Amazon Bedrock, you need a NAT gateway. Of course, here we are not showing a internet gateway, but actually we have here an internet gateway. And if you have your VPC, then the connection goes through NAT gateway, internet gateway, and then the endpoint. Actually, here, you are not going to the public internet, okay? You are still in the AWS backbone, okay? These are not going anywhere. But of course, having an open port for public IPs in a VPC, probably in many customers won't be allowed. And that's why we have another way to do it, right? And if you have your corporate network, that's go through the internet normally, and then when it goes to the peering point of AWS, then it's rerouted to the API endpoint for the inference. This is how the connectivity client is for if you have public APIs in your VPC. If you have private APIs, then this change a little bit, right? And this is where you can have AWS private link between your account and AWS Bedrock Service Account. And this is the way you can use private IPs between the VPCs and the Amazon Bedrock Service team. Again, for this scenario here in the yellow, we are not actually going to the public, but what we have seen in customers is that they don't allow these organizational wise and political wise based on the policies. So the other way to do that, because if you don't trust to having, an internet gateway here, even though these are not going to the internet, is using private link. For your corporate network, on-prem environment, you connect to Direct Connect, go to the VPC, and then we reroute the traffic privately. So nothing different than what you are used to when you are trying to interconnect with different services within other traditional, let's say, services or connecting cross-account things. So the same principles around security is still applied here with client connectivity. Then the on-demand compute, this is actually how the interconnection goes between the service team account. We have the model deployment account, okay? And this is where we have one account per model type, okay? And this is where we deploy a hard copy of the model, and we provision here the compute resources where you can then inference the model. And then we have the Amazon Bedrock Service Account, where we deploy there the endpoint, API endpoint for the inference. So this is your entry point here, and then the runtime inference to then connect to the compute capacity. So we have as many deployment accounts as models we have in Amazon Bedrock. And of course, all these access, control trail, CloudWatch, all that, you can have access on monitoring the KPIs that we mentioned before. All this is encrypted by default, all right? And you are, of course, able to use encryption at rest with KMS and any type of KMS variation that we have. If you want to try your keys, that's something that you can do, or we can generate the keys and maintain the key for you. The provisioning throughput is pretty much the same, okay? The only thing here is that we pass a specific, ARN and model ID, and we have a provisioning capacity for you. So this now, it's only available for you, and only you, and of course the permission that you give to the resources. So even though it's still in the model deployment account, the compute capacity that we deploy here, it's single tenant, and it's only for the account that has deployed provisioning throughput. So with that, let's go to the customization of the model that I think is the biggest part. For many of you, I was to pass this, but I think it will be good to go. We have many techniques in the generative AI landscape to reduce hallucination, to use private data, and to enrich the way we can explode our generative AI application. We go from the more simple one, cost-effective one, which is prompt engineering. Probably many of you know. Then we go to retrieval augmented generation, which is where we use vector database when we use embeddings, vector embeddings. That means that we translate text or image into mathematical representations, and we store that in databases. And that's my private data. I hold that data in a vector database. And then the prompt that I receive, I enrich that prompt with my private data, and then I ask the LLM to generate an answer based on this private data that I gave to them. So here we can reduce a lot hallucination, and we can be very domain specific in things that I want my application to respond on. This is where we see 80% of the companies going, okay? A small amount of companies are doing fine-tuning and pre-training and continue pre-training. And this is the more costly, I will say, and is where you need more expert teams, machine learning and data science teams and all that. In fine-tuning, you need labeled data, okay? So basically, you can share few labeled data to the model, and then the model will be pre-trained. And when continued pre-training is where you need vast amount of data, and you can use unlabeled data, okay? Actually, here you're changing a lot the weights of the models and a lot of things, because you are completely retraining the model with continued pre-training, okay? But the difference is fine-tune is labeled data, continued pre-training is unlabeled data. I will say here we put it the same. I will say more costly, more challenging. Here is more easy. For some models, you don't need a lot of labeled data to fine-tune the model. So the way this goes is, you have your in the left side, you have the customer accounts, right? You have your VPC endpoint, you have your private link, you have your S3 bucket, all that. You have your training data there, and as we said, you manage everything. You manage the encryptation at rest. You manage the access management of your account. You manage everything. Then we have the AWS own account. This is the service account that you said. We said that we have the endpoint, the runtime inference, and the training orchestration, and then we have the model account. So when you want to fine-tune the model, actually we deploy a job in SageMaker, okay? So we are using under the hood a job in SageMaker to fine-tune the model. We create a hard copy of the foundational model. Let's say you are using Meta Llama 3.2. We create a copy of that foundational model. We share it with the job in SageMaker, and then we ask access to your data, okay, your training data. Of course, here you manage, the NNIs, you manage the security groups, you manage the roles, you manage the policy. So until here, you have, everywhere, you have control of your data and what you are passing actually to the SageMaker job. Let me go here. Once you train and fine-tune that, we make a new copy of the base model with the fine-tuned results, and we store it in Amazon S3 bucket, right? So you have it actually in Amazon Bedrock. When you have a customized model, you will have in the console, you know, your S3 bucket and the name that you put it and everything. So you have that copy for you and only you. Not Amazon can use that model, not Anthropic, Llama, or any other. That's your data, okay? So you can encrypt it or anything. Of course, when you have that model, then you have to deploy that model, okay? And you have, let's go back. You have to deploy and create an endpoint. And the only way that you can do that is using provisioning throughput, okay? So you cannot use on-demand inference to deploy fine-tune models, right? But it's really clear that here you always have the control of your data, how you maintain your data, and how the end result model it's maintained in your application and your environment. So just a little bit about this. We talk about the connectivity. We talk about that the same principles that we manage in AWS workloads, traditional workloads, still applies to Amazon Bedrock. We know about how the client connectivity is between the customer accounts and the Amazon Bedrock service team. We know what happened when you customize a model, okay? And now we have to, you know, bring the new challenge that we have when we build a generative AI application. And this is, you know, undesirable, irrelevant topics, toxicity, safety, privacy protection, and bias propagation. And I was just talking about this today, and actually we cannot influence anyhow how these closed models are trained and are biased. Actually, many of these models that we use, specifically OpenAI, Anthropic, and this kind of models that are closed, private, are very challenging and are very biased. They don't have explainability, they don't have transparency. So we need to build all these on top on our application, okay? We need to make sure that we have all the guardrails applied and all the security measures to try to control the bias that these models have. Specifically, all the models talk very well in English, probably not that much in many other small countries' languages, right? So I think, I don't know if it was here or in other user group, I think you had a talk about guardrails. So I don't want to talk too much about this. I just want to share that guardrail is the way that you can, you know, apply safeguards to your application, generative AI, within Bedrock. What I want to talk is about what we have introduced new in guardrails. I don't know if you talk about this last in the other user group, but basically, before we have this layer here, where you can do denied topics, you can have content filtering, you can have sensitive information removal, PII information. Now you have contextual ground checking, which is basically giving you, okay, this information came from this part of the embedding database or the embedding models or these documents YC. And you can filter words, okay? The layer that is new is that now you have two types of invocation, okay? The first one, and was the traditional one until 1 month ago, was that you can call the invoke model. That's the traditional model, or the Converse API from Amazon Bedrock. And basically, we will go through the LLM, and then we will pass to guardrails. So you first have to go to the LLM. You will expend those tokens there. You will pay for those tokens. Then we will go through the guardrail, and then we will block whatever you put here, right? If you have sensitive information, if you have anything. But now what we have introduced is the apply guardrail. This is an independent evaluation. And this allows two things. The first one is that you can intercept prompts and wrong information, prompt injection and all that about this before you reach the LLM. That's one thing within Amazon Bedrock. But the other thing is, because it's an independent evaluation, the apply guardrail, you can use it with third-party models outside AWS. So now you can apply this safeguard in cross your application. So if you are using Anthropic for one piece of your application, but you're using OpenAI for another piece, or you're using another model that is not even inside AWS, then you can apply this to all those models, okay? And we first analyze the prompt about that. If everything is fine, we go to the LLMs, and then we go back, review it again. So it's two-way door. We go it again, and if the response gives some red flags, then we will block it and say it to you. So this is the new thing right now that we have. If you don't know, if you didn't talk about last time in the user group, that is the independent API. And with that, I think that's all. For some of you, there is here some code samples, some workshops also. If you want to do some labs there, you probably have your accounts, or you have your TAM, solutions architect, whatever. Tell them that, give you some labs accounts, and you can do the workshop. And there is some Bedrock blocks available for you here. And thank you very much. Hopefully this was very interesting. You can reach out to me through LinkedIn if you have any question, and if you can respond a survey, it will be very good for us. It's very important, as you all are AWS user probably. This is a way we can improve this and make it more meaningful for you. It's anonymous everything, so don't worry. Thank you very much.